And so the culture they get into is the short-termism of we've got to hit this number because hitting the number equals success. And I've only got a limited runway in order to deliver that success, which equals I've got a good career.
You guys are talking about your product. You're talking about your product early. You're talking about your product often. And you don't know shit about your customer, what they care about. You didn't ask any questions. You just assumed a bunch of things.
Your customers are not waking up thinking about your product. They're not going to wake up and say, I need to go and buy Walter's beautiful cigar boxes, right? They're not thinking about that. What they're thinking about is, I've got some sort of problem that I need to solve. Who do I know in the marketplace that might be able to solve that? And if we can position ourselves as a possible solution for that problem, then at least that might engage with a conversation.
Everyone, welcome to Sales and Cigars. I'm Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host. My guest today is Darren Mitchell. He lives on the other side of the world in Australia. I've been a guest on his podcast, Exceptional Sales Leader. Great podcast. If you want to understand about sales leadership and how important coaching and mentoring is to a sales leader, his podcast is great. And that's what we talk about today. We talk about his ideas and philosophy around how he got to that point, how he had mentors, how he sought that out, and how he approaches that with inspiration and accountability with the people that he works with. So go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, strap in for another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. Darren, I really appreciate you taking some time to be on the Sales and Cigars podcast. I've been on yours. We're going to talk about your podcast, but thank you very much for getting up early and having a chat.
Thanks, Walter. Great to be here. It's not that early. I have been up for about an hour or so, so that's all right. Chores to do.
But it's tomorrow. I love, like in Australia, whenever I talk to somebody, it's always tomorrow. It's the future.
It is tomorrow. Yeah. And it's rare that I actually speak to somebody in the US on the same day.
Well, you would have to be what? You'd have to be really late for you and really early for us. Is that
correct? Yeah. Correct. Yeah. It'd be probably, if I spoke to you at close to midnight, you will be probably looking at the back of your eyelids. That's the big difference. And that's why Australia is called down under and so far away.
Yeah.
Big time difference.
And you're enjoying the ends of summer right now, and I'm enjoying 11 degrees and snow.
Yes, and as we're recording this, we've got a long weekend coming up because it's Australia Day on Monday. And
what do you do on Australia Day?
Well, we used to have barbecues and celebrate the country. Now it's more known as, because we've got a lot more wokeness in Australia, it's now known as Invasion Day. So a lot of the institutions do not celebrate it. So it's literally just a public holiday. So people do their own thing, and it's designed to celebrate inclusion and our culture. But over the last few years, it's pretty much been destroyed to the point where if you even go so far as to have an Australian flag out in front of your house, you're considered to be racist. That's how bad it's got over here. So, but I'm not going to talk about that. What I was meaning is,
I started it.
Oh yeah, I know you did, but that's okay. I know 11 degrees and snow. I mean, and I know you're talking in Fahrenheit. We're looking at probably something over 100 Fahrenheit over the next few days, and it's potentially bushfire season again. So
that's not very inclusive. 100 degrees isn't very inclusive.
No, that's right. And if you're smart, you do not go outside when it's over 100 degrees.
Yeah,
stay inside.
Going outside in Australia can be dangerous just in and of itself, with all those bugs and animals that want to eat you.
True.
Okay, so happy Australia Day or Inclusion Day, however you're going to celebrate that. I like to start off with the book question, right? So is there a book that you either reread yourself or you gift a lot to business associates?
There is. There's actually two, and I apologise if that is oversubscribed. But the first one is this one,
Infinite Game,
called the Infinite Games, and the reason I like that is that a lot of the organisations that I work with, a lot of the sales leaders I work with, are under so much pressure to hit a short-term target. And so the whole narrative around the organisation is, how do we get the short-term focus and the short-term results that we need to appease our shareholders? And when they do that, often they're not looking at what is the customer looking for, and how can we build some sustainability and longevity in our relationships. And the reason I love that concept is Simon Sinek talks about the fact that great organisations don't necessarily plan quarter to quarter. They plan years and years in advance, and they're always playing a game. The players might change, the rules of the game might change, but essentially the game never stops. And so if we think about it from a selling perspective, certainly from a sales leader's point of view, we want to create a team where the environment is such that they're building relationships that last well beyond a quarter, which starts to mean we're going to be more strategic in what we do. We're going to be more aligned to being a strategic partner / a strategic advisor to our customers, and not focused on what do we need to get so that we can hit our internal number or our short number. So it's and I've read this about 4 or 5 times, and it's something that I always try to get people to look at, and as a way of changing their thinking. It's not easy, because the vast majority of organizations that do have a sales number focus on what do I need to do this week and next week in order to hit my target. Because if I don't hit my target, I'm going to have my sales manager riding me like a bucking bull to try and bring that number forward. So it's a psychology shift.
Which makes I guess I'm curious. Sales leaders, VP of sales, CRO kind of guy or gal, in Australia, 16, 18 months tenure or longer.
It's interesting. It's about that. I would normally say around about 2 years. And I think one of my experience and my thought on that is, a lot of the time these people are placed in those positions where they were anointed that role. They weren't necessarily chasing that role. And so the culture they get into is the short-termism of, we've got to hit this number because hitting the number equals success for me, and I've only got a limited runway in order to deliver that success, which equals I've got a good career. Versus if we can take a little bit of a step back, and part of this also presupposes you've got to have a really good pipeline, right? Because when you've got a good, healthy pipeline, a number of customers to talk to, the pressure on the short-termism is not as great.
Right.
When we've got that, then it's a lot easier for then the sales leaders to build more deeper relationships, not just with their team. They can build strategies of long-term. They can now start to engage with customers that are more long-term. And you may actually not get the short-term results that a hustle-type culture may get, but I guarantee that over time you're going to deliver a lot more longer-term sustainable results and profitable results and engagement with your customers.
And that's sort of a corporate problem, right? I was going to say corporate America, but it's a corporate problem where they're chasing the revenue number for the quarterly review. And I completely agree that if we're looking at wins for the customer, looking at wins for the company, and looking at wins for the team, the only way to do that is, the long-term value of that customer, and what do we have to do to hold on to them and take care of them.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I literally had a podcast episode last night with a colleague from the UK who's just done another set of research. He did a doctorate 15 years ago on the topic of how do customers or how do buyers like to be sold to. And through that research, he found that there were 4 negative values mindsets and 4 positive value mindsets. And interestingly, what stops sales organizations from being successful in the long term is they're too supplier focused. That is, there's too much focus on themselves. There's too much manipulation, and they get complacent, and they have this level of arrogance to say, well, we've got the best products, you need to, and it's a push type sale. Versus if they've got an authentic relationship, they're more customer centric or buyer centric. They've got this ability to be audacious in terms of how they challenge the customer, but they build robust relationships, then it becomes more of a peer-based relationship, which then paves the way for more revenue, high profitability, but long-term relationships, which is interesting.
You gain the share of wallet, but you earn it, right? Because they know that you're going to take care of them. There's another book that Corey Doctorow, I think is the name. It's called The Enshittification. It's a term he coined, and he talks about the 4 stages a company goes through, and it's reminiscent of what you're talking about here, of the research that this guy did, that a company goes through, and they're all about the building a brand and taking care of customers, and they're all about the customer till they get to a certain point, right? And it becomes, there's 4 stages, and the last stage is like they don't care.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to lose you, but I'm going to pick up 2 more. It doesn't matter who you are. We're gonna be fine. And they screw their customers, and they screw their suppliers, and ultimately they screw their employees.
Yes.
And we're thinking, he calls out Apple, Meta, Amazon. Like he hates Amazon.
Okay.
So it's interesting, and it all is all based on the short term view. So that was one book. What's your other book there, Mr. Overton?
The other book is, and look, people probably have seen this before, but I just keep coming back to this all the time, and it's Micro Habits, Atomic Habits from James Clear. Sure. As a salesperson, there is so much that we are responsible for doing, and as a sales leader, there's a lot of expectations that are placed upon us, and we can very much get caught up in the big macro strategies. But what he does, James Clear does, is he breaks down the small things you can do on a daily basis. So when you think about the calls you can make, the outreach, the strategy, the tactics, what can you do on a daily, hourly, minute-to-minute basis that over time will compound and develop a habit that now becomes sustainable? And it's not necessarily the big things that we think that need to be put in place to have a strategic change in an organization. It's the daily disciplines that we can do and get good at that over time will compound. And the good thing about it, and the theme that comes through it, is there's really no excuse for anybody, right? Anybody, no matter where you're at and where you're starting from, can start to develop some habits of success and some habits of excellence that over time will actually develop an unconscious habit to get you to unconscious competence, where you can get some sustainable results.
I mean, and that works for sales. It works for just your own health and wealth. Doing those little things, like one of the things I took away from that book is, if you want to get up and go exercise in the morning, right, whatever that looks like, put your shit out the night before.
That's it.
So it's already there, and you're good to go. You've made the decision. It's easy. Boom, you're out the door. There's no thinking. Because we're pretty good at finding excuses for not doing things.
Well, just on that, they say that some of the biggest challenges for people going to a gym, particularly if you're new to that and you're on a health kick, is getting out the door. So if you can get out the door, then you pretty much break or create a new habit. In fact,
sometimes it's just getting out of bed.
Well, exactly. In fact, I was going to say there was one example he has in the book where there was a guy that was quite overweight, but he had a desire to improve himself, get fitter, and so on and so forth. So he joined a gym, but for the first period of time, and I think it was for the first month or so, the only thing he did is he got dressed, went to the gym, went inside the gym, looked around, and went home again, right? And people might have been looking at him and saying, "What are you doing? You come to the gym, you do nothing. Look at the size of you. No wonder you're that size." And yet what he was trying to do was create a new habit, because he knew that if he went there on a regular basis, that he would keep going. And if he kept going through that door, he would then go and sit on an exercise bike. Then he would start on a treadmill. And so over time, he built up that habit, and he stayed longer and longer and longer, and therefore the habit was formed. Now it doesn't even think about it.
Yeah, and that's where you get to, like, that, as you said, unconscious competence. And the Cynic book I have not read. So I'm gonna go look at that. But the premise is something that is helpful to sales leaders, and that's what we're really going to talk about here. And so give us a little background, like, exceptional sales leader, that's your organization. Talk a little bit about your journey through the sales funnel, if you will.
Sure. And I'm not going to give you the full version because I'll be here for hours. I was born back back before TV actually arrived in Australia, or good TV. I did have a TV when I was
you're not that old.
I'm not that old. So I actually started off my career as an engineer. I had this desire to be a high-profile project manager working on multi-story skyscrapers in Melbourne, in Australia. But back in the late 80s, early 90s, Australia had a recession that the then Prime Minister said we have to have. Right? Interest rates went through the roof. The company I worked for went broke. They tried to go back a couple of times and went broke again. So I'm thinking, okay, I've done an engineering degree. There's no work in engineering. What am I going to do now? So I ended up working for a company called Optus, which was the second telecommunications carrier in Australia. And they had just literally started. So I jumped into telemarketing, and that was my very first, I guess, introduction to sales, because my first role was calling small businesses and talking to them about telecommunications. And it was cold calling, and I didn't mind that. But long story short, I started to work with some people in the Optus business area, which was guys that were managing accounts, big organizations, and did a bit of work with them. And I thought, geez, these sales guys, they tend to have some long lunches. They tend to have a bit of spare time. They drive some nice cars. They tend to wear some pretty cool suits. I wonder how much money they make. So I started working closely with them and said, I want a piece of that action. And I managed to get some secondments and eventually got an opportunity, and started to work with a very experienced salesperson on one of our largest accounts in Australia, which was a company called Pacific Dunlop, which was a consortium of multiple different organizations, probably a multi-billion-dollar company around late 90s, early 2000s. And I did that for a few years, but I didn't necessarily enjoy the individual contributor, because I found that I was doing a lot of what I now know is coaching and mentoring of peers and helping people develop and move into sales, because I loved what I was doing, and I found that I had a natural affliction to it. And I was mentoring people and helping them get into sales, and I thought, maybe if I can become a sales manager, I can actually help more salespeople become better at what they do. So I spent 2 years looking at how I become a sales manager. What's the philosophy? What's the structure I would put in place? How would I lead teams? And then 2 years later, I was given the opportunity to lead the team that I was a individual contributor in. An interesting story about that was one of the people that was in my team that was reporting to me was also my very first sales mentor. And thankfully, he was a huge support as I made that transition, because it was quite challenging, because most of the people in that team had more experience than I did when it comes to not just selling. Some had already been a sales manager, but had gone back to being an individual contributor. So that was an interesting experience. But the reason I share that part is I talk now about the benefits and the importance of having good mentors, good coaches around you. And unfortunately, a lot of sales managers are placed in a position of sales leadership, not because they decide to do that, but because the company said you're really good, so we're going to put you into a sales management role. But here's the thing, we're not necessarily going to give you the transition plan or the development or the mentoring or the coaching to help you become a leader of people, not just a super salesperson. So that was an interesting time. And look, as time went on, I did that for a number of years, but 2015 came around, and I was doing a lot of external work in terms of coaching and mentoring and facilitation, and I ended up leaving corporate in 2015. And since then, I've been running programs, mentoring, coaching, specifically focusing on sales teams and sales leaders. And in 2020, started the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. So that's where the brand comes from, Exceptional Sales Leader. And my whole remit is to help lift the caliber of sales and sales leadership, not just in Australia, but around the world. Because we have a void of good leadership, not just in selling, but I think generally.
Well, I mean, it's a interesting story. There's a couple of things I wanted to pull the thread. being a top salesperson or being a big contributor,
yeah,
we're always asked to like, well, you know how to do that. Maybe you can whip these other guys into shape and become sales manager.
Yeah,
and that's a thing that I've preached about for years, that it's a terrible idea. Because that's how I got my first sales manager job. Somebody said, "Hey, you're doing a good job. Why don't you kind of manage these other guys?" And I was dumb enough to take it. And I remember it was offered to me, sales director, North America, managed this whole team. And I told my wife about it. Happened at a Christmas party. And back when they could be called Christmas parties. And I was on the drive home and I told my wife, like, this is what happened. And she's like, that's awesome. Congratulations. It's cool. Have you ever managed anybody before? Because you can barely manage yourself. Right. And I've told that story multiple times, and sadly it's true. But I realized at that moment, like, I had no idea how to do it, because to one of your other points, there are so many poor sales managers because we get promoted. We have so few mentors, coaches, people that we can emulate. We don't, in the sales world, we just don't have it. Coaching isn't something that is common, and it's really a problem that you're trying to fix. To a certain extent, I'm trying to correct, just to elevate the profession.
Yeah.
But it's a real problem, and business owners make assumptions, right, about that. They make assumptions about messaging. They make assumptions that salespeople know how to do certain things, and most salespeople aren't that good to begin with, but they certainly aren't copywriters and great storytellers. So I love the fact that you were drawn to this idea of mentorship and coaching. So it goes into this. The thing I wanted to talk about was when you sit down with that freshly minted sales leader, right? And they're wide-eyed, they're excited, but they got no freaking idea what they're going to do, right? I mean, what do you say to them to get them to start to realize that they do need some help and guidance, and that they could crash and burn, right? I mean, do you tell them that straight up, or are you kinder than I am?
I'd probably use maybe different language, but essentially the message is still the same. And I hark back to my very first morning of my first role as a sales manager. My then general manager, Danny, sat me down and said a couple of things. And number one, he said, welcome to sales leadership, welcome to the ranks, and welcome to the bottom rung of the ladder. In other words, you're starting again. And the second, this is like 2 hours in, my feet weren't even under the desk. The second question he asked me was, Darren, who is your likely successor?
Wow.
And this is on the first morning. And I'm thinking, man, that's a really interesting question to ask me. Why the hell are you asking me that? I haven't even got my feet under the desk, Danny.
What did I do?
Exactly. Have I potentially been the wrong choice? But what he was saying is, essentially the message was, hey, it's not about you. Your role as a sales leader, and I say this to all sales leaders that I work with, and also leaders that are not in necessarily sales, but the principle is still the same. The ultimate purpose for you being a sales leader, other than driving results and all that sort of stuff, is to get to a point where you are no longer required and you make your role redundant. Now, in order for you to be redundant, you need to identify people who can continue to carry the baton, because the purpose, coming back to the infinite game, the purpose is to make sure that the team continues to be sustainably successful and not reliant on you for it to be sustainably successful. So the only way for that to happen is to get good people into the team, develop those people within the team, and get to the point where the team now is self-serving, that they no longer require you to lead the team. Now, that is very confronting for a lot of people, because as soon as I mention the word redundant, what do you think most people are thinking? Shit, am I going to lose my job?
Sure.
It's not about that. It's not about you. It's about you creating an environment where you can have some sustainability, which gives people a roadmap that they can actually develop and maybe someday also take on a role of responsibility so you can duplicate yourself. That means you're actually going to start to create a leadership legacy or a leadership shadow where you'll be wanted, because most organizations and most sales leaders focus on what do I have to do today to be successful and make it about me, versus what environment can I create so my team is successful and I take a step back. Now, the reason coaching and mentoring becomes so important is, as we've talked about, a lot of the time that sales leader is thrust into the sales role and they have been used to getting all the accolades, running the deals, riding in on the white horse to be the savior of the deal.
The hero.
And they get all the accolades from that. They become the hero.
Yeah.
And they like to be center stage. But what they don't necessarily realize is that through that process, they segregate and sometimes disintermediate their sales team and start to teach the customers that, if you want deals done, if you want things escalated, if you want change to happen, you've got to go to the sales leader. I don't want that.
Well, it's ego. You're minimizing your people. And as any leader, no matter what the role is, the goal is really to exactly what you said, develop other leaders, right?
Yeah.
They may not want to take that role, but they develop as a leader and they become a player coach, if you will, on the team. They're helping the other team members, right? That's when, they might not want to take that big leap, right? They love the being a contributor, but I liken it to, I don't know if it applies in Australian football, but in American football, right? If the idea of a great head coach is to hire people that are smarter than them in specific areas, and then give them the guardrails and here's the strategy, here's what we're going to do. You guys go do your thing and don't get in their way.
Yeah.
Right. And do they win games? The goal, sure. The head coach, gets those accolades, but they're developing those assistant coaches, those co-coaches, right? All of that. And then you literally see it in American football, where there's a football coaching tree that started with this guy, and 3 generations later, it's a coaching tree. And that's normal in athletics.
Yeah.
It's not normal in sales or corporate America, because athletes want to be coached. Salespeople don't necessarily want to be coached. So that idea that you're replacing yourself, and your general manager who asked you that question, looking back at it, or maybe you did ask him, did he do that on purpose to really get you to be thinking about being a leader? And that was his underlying goal, to start from day one to get you to be thinking about being a great leader.
I think he consciously did that. And a little bit of the backstory there is I spent 2 years up until that point, formulating my approach to leadership in terms of how I would run a sales team, what's important to me, and what's my philosophy. And I was also like an annoying little mosquito to him, because I was always at him to say, mate, when's the opportunity coming? And he turned around to me one day and said, Darren, you don't have to keep talking to me about this. We know you're going to get a sales leadership role. It's just a matter of when, not if. But having said that, I still had to go through the process. But to your point, he was definitely trying to instill in me the importance of starting off with the right philosophy and not falling into the trap like so many other leaders in that organization. They were just super salespeople. In fact, no deal really got done without the fingerprints of the sales leader being all over that deal. And what he was trying to tell me was, you've got, just like a great head coach in a sporting team, and yes, in Australia we've got the same sort of structures, you've got good players in right positions. So if you can get and build a team, and when you continue to expand a team, bring people in that complement what you already have, but bring diversity, look for specific strengths and let them be excellent at what they do. You become then the orchestra, or the conductor of the orchestra. You don't have to be the doer. So you can start to leverage yourself. So trust people to do a good job, but you've also got to develop them and set the environment up so they can do a good job. He was trying to instill that in me, which means that he didn't want me to be involved in every single deal. He wanted me able to set the strategy and help develop the team in terms of what are the key things and the key pillars we need to work on. But the nitty gritty, you shouldn't get involved. Now, even with that, Walter, here's the thing. My first 90 days, I thought the best way to build trust with my team was to get involved and solve all their problems. So guess what I did? I said, hey, guys, I've got an open door policy. Come to me with all your challenges and let's work through them and I'll solve them. So they did. So instead of creating...
And then he's going like this, watching you do that.
What are you doing, mate? But he didn't. And the good thing about it is he didn't jump in straight away. He let me learn the hard way. So 90 days, I nearly burnt out.
A bloody nose is a good way to learn. Especially in sales. It's not lucky, right? You're in the right spot, but it's very unusual, right? And it speaks to how you operate today to have somebody like that early in your career to help you, right? You had mentors, you had people that that supported that. That's rare. And we need more of that in the organization. I think people take those roles. See, I took the role as a sales director because I thought it was like the next thing you're supposed to do. Yeah. In reality, if you're not really looking at the details, you lose money. It's a lot more work. It's not as much fun. You've got less flexibility in your life. I mean, all of my friends who worked at competitors, right, that we all knew each other, they were like, "What's the matter with you? Why would you do that?" Right? And they weren't wrong, but I took it as a challenge, right? So I had to go figure it out. And I had a CEO there that fancied himself an entrepreneur and somebody that wanted to help. So, I mean, I got some guidance and a lot of support. But he didn't have an open door policy, right? It was, and he wanted me to make mistakes. But even to this day, and I've never really thought about it, I think the idea that how I help sales teams now, like, hey, can you come to the meeting with me? And I always said, why? And they're like, well, I need help. All right, well, then let's talk about what you need. Because my goal was like for them to go do a good job to the extent that, you know, within their skill set, but prep them, get them thinking about questions. Because I would tell them, I was like, if I go to the meeting, I'm going to sit there and it's your meeting. You're going to run the meeting. You're going to do the work, and I'll give you all the rope you need to really strangle yourself and get yourself all knotted up. Right. and sometimes we'll just let it there and we'll lose a deal. Yeah. Right. Because it's not my job to go be that hero. Yeah. I need to be working with you. So like, let's come to me early in this process. Right. So I had to literally train salespeople, develop that trust and rapport, talk about deals early, talk about what we need to do, follow the process, and that you can be, right? Like somebody would come to me and say, hey, you know, you guys closed 3 big deals. This is great. I'm like, I didn't do it. They did it. It wasn't me. Yeah. And you have a sense of pride, right? You helped them, but it was from the sidelines. It wasn't in the game. I didn't do it.
Oh, totally. And when you think about what a great head coach does, they don't play the game. They can't play the game. But they help facilitate maybe the strategy, but they expect the team to have the capability to execute on the strategy, and they'll just maybe give some advice or give some guidance as they go through. It's really interesting that a lot of, and I'm the same, of when you go to customer meetings and you've got your account manager there, or you've got a senior person that's come in with you, there's almost this unconscious hierarchical feeling that I've got to default to the senior person, or I've got to introduce them as the senior vice president of sales, and that by some stroke of luck might actually get the deal in our favor. But when the vice president of sales just sits there and does nothing, it's like, wow, What do I do here? Which is a great lesson, right? So it's not about hierarchy. So to ask the question like you did, why do you want me there, right? I'm there to support you, but I'm not there to run the strategy, and I'm certainly not the one there to create the environment for the customer or the impression that I am the go-to person, because that's just ego, right?
Right.
So
100%. It's sitting in that meeting where I've literally had, as a sales manager, leader person with the salesperson, the customer looked at me like, "Why are you here?" Right? Towards the end of the meeting, and I'm like, "Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, just support him and make sure that he feels comfortable. But really, it's to make you feel comfortable that everything that he says we're going to do, we're going to do.
Yeah,
the company is behind him. We're 100% going to make it work, right?
Yeah.
So, he's like, but you haven't said anything. I'm like, because he knows what he's doing. I'm just here as a backstop. That's all.
Yeah, that's it.
Have you ever had to take a senior person with you, and before you get out of the car, grab their arm and say, "Don't say a word unless I look at you and ask you a question"? Have you ever had to do that?
I have had to do that, and I've had to do that, and a lot of this does depend on the appetite of the senior leader in terms of whether they want to be the hero, whether they want to be seen as the big kahuna. I'll say the good ones. The good ones, yes, you give them a brief, but they are very specific on asking you, what is it that you want me to play in terms of the role?
The good ones will ask that question, right?
They'll always ask that question. Others just come in and say, "Hey, I got this." And I've seen them undo a deal by saying the wrong thing. So the conversation afterwards, and they ask, "How did that go?" So how do you think that just went? You've just undone 3 months worth of work. Thank you for that. But that's my fault because I didn't preface and I didn't prepare them, and I didn't.
But a salesperson is often, they're often intimidated to have that conversation with the leader. I took my boss out on the same day. We had 2 meetings. And the first one, he did that, right? He just, bleh, right? And just shit all over the meeting. And we walked out and he goes, that went really well. I'm like, you think it? And I just read him the riot act, right? Because I wasn't really concerned about losing my job. And so we got to the other meeting and I literally looked at him and said, "Don't say a fucking word unless I ask you a question." And I know this guy, I know what he cares about, and you're not going to bring any value. He's like, "Why am I here?" "Look pretty. That's it. Just look pretty." My customer was like, we went through thing, got to the point. He was an old Marine, like all business, get it done, and then you can, have some yucks. And he literally looked at he's like, "Why'd you bring him?" Sometimes you just got to bring the boss out to show him, what you're doing. He's like, yeah.
And sometimes the boss needs to get out and see the real world. They need to get out of the office a little bit because otherwise they're just sitting behind their laptop, maybe looking at all the forecasting.
Yeah, he looked a little bored and pale. He needed some sunlight, so we just brought him out for the meeting.
That's it. But just on that though, Walter, the key thing though is that as a sales professional, you've got to, and when I talk about exceptional sales leadership, I'm not just talking about leaders from a sales team where they have people reporting to them. As an individual contributor, you can still be an exceptional sales leader because when you think about it, you're working in a hierarchical organization. You have a position of influence that you can utilize effectively, which means just because you bring in the vice president of sales in, you're the one that owns the account and you're the one that should be leading that person, right? So don't let them come in with their big title and say, "Hey, I know how to run this." Be very specific, which means you need to brief them and you need to know what you're talking about. You need to know what the things are you need to avoid, but also the things you need to focus on. And be really courageous to say, "Hey, when you come out here, this is the," and give them the proper brief. Be very specific, though, on what you want them to do and not do. And that's where you give them those guardrails.
Yeah, and it's a role, right? You're like, here's the role, right? And there should be a role for them in the meeting. Right, I'm being a smartass about things, but when those meetings are productive, you're bringing somebody for a reason, right? To help validate or tell something technical or to support a particular idea, but there's a role for it. And as a professional, you should have that brief, because it's going to give that leader the confidence, like, okay, he's got this under can. He understands the account. He understands the customer. There's an objective for this meeting. All right. So like, let's go, go team and go do that.
Yeah.
Let me ask this question. It's a little bit of a pivot. What mistake do you see repeated in larger organizations as it relates to the sales team and supporting them broadly? Is there one thing that sticks out in your mind, or two things?
Well, I'm biased because I will always come back to the development side and the coaching and the mentoring side. One thing I do see a lot is a lot of the training that sales teams go through is very product and surface focused. And so you've got to drink the Kool-Aid, Walter. You've got to drink our Kool-Aid. We have the best product. We have the best service. So why wouldn't anybody just want to fall over themselves to buy it? What we're not teaching them and what we're not setting sales teams up for is to understand the nuances of human psychology, biocentricity, what makes people tick, why do people behave in certain ways, what are the gates we have to take people through, how do we learn to take them through a buyer's journey and understand the cycle that customers go through versus trying to retrofit that into our selling cycle. So it's all, unfortunately, it's all seller, or most of it, it's seller focused. We've got to sell this product. We've got to hit this short-term target. But we say we place the customer at the front of everything we do, or in the center of everything we do. But behavior often dictates otherwise. Yeah. So the frustration that I see is you got some great people, and you might have an organization that has a great service and a great product, but they're not successful or as successful as they could be, because they're taking their eyes off what's important, and that is, how do they best serve their customer? And I always talk about that sales is the ultimate form of service, but it only is that when you can identify a problem that the customer wants to solve or needs to solve, and then you give them the opportunity to see a solution. Whether they take that solution or not is up to them, because that will depend on where they sit in their buying cycle. But my job as a sales team, and certainly as a sales leader, is to create enough conversations where we're talking about enough problems, bringing some insights, and giving the opportunity for those customers to look at a solution. It is not trying to proactively go out and flog a product, which unfortunately I was in the environment where that was the case, because we had partnerships with big companies like Cisco, for example. And Cisco would say, you know what, we need to promote this particular router or this particular piece of equipment. So they'd put in incentives for the sales teams within our telecommunications companies to go out and flog that. And they'd get big bonuses for it. Customers didn't want that. So it became a push sell, not a pull sell.
And it's not helping, it's not service, it's not helping sales, it's about helping people, recognizing that. I went into a client, and they wanted me to help their sales team, and we were, I listened to some of their calls, went to some meetings, and sat down with the guy, the owner, and the team, and they're like, "What did you see?" I'm like, "You guys are talking about your product.
Yeah,
you're talking about your product early. You're talking about your product often, and you don't know shit about your customer, what they care about. You didn't ask any questions. You just assumed a bunch of things."
Yeah.
And if you stop talking about your product and start asking some questions, maybe your product fits. You got the best mousetrap out there. They literally have the best mousetrap. Their unique mechanism, as I call it, is spectacular. Nobody can touch it. But you got to take that buyer on a journey to see if they have the problem, help them understand the problem, and then see if they really are serious about solving that problem. If there's something compelling about it, if there's a financial reason, time reason, and then you still have to educate them on why your product is a better fit than the guy down the street. We're not educating them about everything. You're educating them about their own problems a lot of times, and you can't do that by telling.
No, and that's the issue, that most organizations focus on the features of their own product. So it's very product focused, product centric, And as you rightly say, they don't ask near enough questions. And if they did, if they recognize this, and I say this to sales teams all the time, understand this, and it might sound harsh because they think, oh, we've got this great product, we're here to serve the market. Yeah, great, fantastic. Your customers are not waking up thinking about your product. They're not going to wake up and say, I need to go and buy Walter's beautiful cigar boxes, right? They're not thinking about that. What they're thinking about is, I've got some sort of problem that I need to solve. Who do I know in the marketplace that might be able to solve that? And if we can position ourselves as a possible solution for that problem, then at least that might engage with a conversation. But when that happens, you've still got to qualify to say, well, actually, do you have this problem? And what have you tried to, what have you done to try to fix it in the past? But the big question is, what's it costing you, or what will it cost you if you don't fix this particular problem?
Yeah.
And until you can uncover that, and that's all about the customer, you shouldn't be talking at all about your product.
Absolutely not. It's around baseball. It's like over there, closer to third base. It's got nothing to do between home and third. All right. You dropped a bunch of gold nuggets. Could you share with the audience? My audience is a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, and some sales leaders. Like, how do they know? How do they self-select that they should be talking to Darren? And then what's the best way for them to reach out to you? You do a lot of work in this country.
I do. And when I say I do a lot of work, I do a lot of work. I talk to a lot of people. The best place to get me is LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, you'll have links to my website, which is the exceptionalsalesleader.com. There's also a link on that for access to my podcast, to which you have been, Walter, a guest on the podcast, not once, but twice.
Repeat offender.
Yes, you are a repeat offender because for your sins, you're a good bloke.
Thank you.
And the podcast is designed similar to this. It's to inspire and to educate and to lift the caliber of sales and sales leadership, not just in Australia but around the world. And been doing that for 6 years now, and have the privilege to continue to speak to some phenomenal people around the world who have different backgrounds, different ways of doing things, but all share the common theme, and is how do we actually help sales become better and really put it on the map as a profession that people should be proud of. And that's the mission we're on. So LinkedIn, exceptionalsalesleader.com is the website, and of course the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast on all reputable podcasting platforms, and also some dodgy ones.
Who's the person you love working with the most?
In terms of the name of the person?
No. Smart ass, like the title, the kind of company, a little. Your ICP, my friend.
ICP is mid-tier corporates up to large organizations that have sales teams that have sales leadership. And when I say sales leadership, this is not, because I know some smaller organizations, they have sales leaders that carry an individual target as well as responsibility for a team. Where I actually focus my attention on is organizations that have a sales team with a sales leader who is responsible for driving the sale. So organizations that do 5 to 10 million a year plus upwards, that have at least one or two sales teams. And they bring me in because either they're not getting the results they thought they were getting, or they've got some cultural challenges within the team that they need to work through.
Awesome. So, last question. Any relationship, past or present, with cigars?
I was trying to think about that because we had a bit of a chat before you press record. I've actually smoked a few cigars, but I can't remember where. What I will say,
was alcohol involved there, Darren?
Yeah, there was alcohol involved. What I will say is I don't. My dad used to smoke cigarettes, and my grandparents used to smoke cigarettes as well. But I can't remember. I think it might have been my grandfather that had a cigar one day. The thing that I love about cigars is just the smell of the cigar. There's just something about it that I don't know. It's alluring. Not that I've really smoked many. I think I've smoked about 2 in my life, but it's an alluring smell, and I know, and you probably know more about you've forgotten more about cigars than I would ever know about cigars. But it's
but you're, so this is interesting. I've never had a cigarette in my life.
okay.
I've never tried one. They seem disgusting to me. But this doesn't. It's different for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But the cigarette smoke and the cigar smoke, wildly different things, right?
Yeah.
But you're okay. Most people I ask that question, that aren't a regular cigar smoker, they've had them once or twice, or they have them once a year, and it's some celebratory situation, or it's a connection with a father, brother, uncle, grandfather, or something. Right? There's a familial reason for doing it, and I started with cigars on a golf course with friends.
Okay.
Because I sucked at golf. It gave me something else to think about rather than the next shot. But I was outside with friends.
Yeah.
Usually some alcohol involved, but and to me that's what it's about. I have a lot of contemplative cigars where I'm just kind of thinking through something. I told a friend of mine who's a cigar smoker, I have 4 to 6 cigars a day, and he about fell out of his chair. Like, how do you do that? You start early, go late.
Start early.
But yeah, well, I mean, I think the reason I've been on your podcast a couple times because we think like what we're really trying to do. Our niches are different, but we're really trying to help the profession elevate, right? And you said it. Be proud of, and for us to be proud of the profession as a whole, right? Because when you say sales to somebody, they think, short sleeve shirt, clip on tie, loud blazer, used car sales guy.
That's
right?
it.
And that's a salesperson that I don't know. I've never thought of that as I thought of it as a profession. I mean, I backed into it. I fell backwards into it, but it's just something that you can literally make money and have a good time and really help people if you do it well.
And that's the thing. That's why my whole philosophy is that selling is the ultimate form of service. And I've got clients that I've asked questions of in terms of why don't you have sales in your job title? You're a sales rep. Don't call yourself a customer success manager. Don't call yourself an account director. You're a salesperson. Own it and say to your customers, I'm here to sell. But the way I go about it will differentiate me against everybody else because I'm not here to push stuff you don't want. I'm here to be of service. And I'm also going to have the robust conversations when we need to have those robust conversations.
You're doing it right when you don't sound like, quote unquote, the salesperson.
That's it. That's it.
All right.
And you'll be effective.
Right. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the insights. I mean, there's a lot of value here for the audience. So thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Walter. It's an absolute pleasure, my friend.